hosted by the Society of Petroleum Data Managers, or SPDM for short. The society was founded in 2019 officially, but it's been going planning before that in 2018. And its vision is to inspire lifelong learning, advanced knowledge and careers for data managers within the oil and gas and the wider energy industry. Also to promote equal standing with other professional disciplines. And whilst our purpose is to provide technical petroleum data managers with means to grow their careers and competencies through professional development, community events and meetings and shared knowledge. My name is Jane Hodson. I'm a data manager and I will be facilitating this online webinar and will ensure, along with some of my colleagues, questions are collated and discussed and that we follow house rules, which we'll talk about shortly. In the meantime, I want to just give you a little bit of an insight into Kerry Blinston, who is our guest speaker for today. He holds a degree in geological sciences from Leeds University and then went on to do a master's in petroleum geology from the University of Aberdeen, and he started out as a sedimentologist working for Robertson's Research. He now manages CGG's global data management business line as the Vice President for Smart Data Solutions. I think that's a great title. As an active member of the International Petroleum Data Management community, he sits on the advisory group for the RGU Graduate Certificate in Petroleum Data Management and is currently co-leading the Data Security Entitlements and Obligations team for Open Subsurface Data Universe, or OSDU as some people know it. Also, a very interesting fact for everybody to be aware of, just in case. Kerry's house is actually below Colwyn Bay or Welsh Zoo. So if you hear a tiger roar, it really is the tiger roaring or the dog barking, depending on how it sounds. Just thought I'd give you an introduction to Kerry. Our aim at the moment is to stimulate talks and presentations online. And as a board, we noticed that in conference attendance, it's largely very limited to the same group of people that are able to justify time and costs, and we felt we needed to offer something different. This is not due to COVID-19, although it was already decided we would do this online presence, and that was our solution. And in a way, it's sadly working in a way with the COVID-19 situation. The objective of what we hope we will become regular talks is to inform, educate, inspire and stimulate debate. Our goal is to enable petroleum and engineering and energy sector managers to more rapidly grow their knowledge and their careers. Okay, this is a long introduction for the first time because we just want to introduce the SPDM. Got a few house rules. Presenters are not allowed to use this talk to promote themselves or their products or services. Presenters should support statements with facts and follow normal academic standards. Where what is presented as an opinion, it should be identified as such and contrary viewpoints highlighted. Attendees should switch the mute button on so we can't hear them most of the time, if you don't mind that one. We're not asking a question. Obviously, you can unmute it if you need to ask a question. This provides better sound quality. Feel free to ask questions when these are called for by the facilitator, myself, or maybe the presenter. You may also submit questions using the chat function. That's the preferred way. These sessions include a questions and answers at the end. So if you have any questions, pop them into the chat box and we will deal with them. Okay, so I'm going to now pass it over to our esteemed colleague, Kerry, to start presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. So I've called this presentation today decisions, 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 and really those are decisions that relate to the transition that the industry is making from legacy application environments to centralized cloud-based systems. I think it's pretty important to say that, you know, our aim in these sessions was to, you know, primarily it's to promote discussion and thought and just give people an avenue into, what other people are thinking and the decisions and the things that are happening to them on a day-to-day basis in petroleum data management. So it's not a traditional academic paper. It doesn't have a hypothesis. We don't present data particularly or necessarily arguments and draw conclusions. So it's perhaps a bit different to some conference presentations that you will sit through, and that's deliberate. So it's quite short and really just covers a few different topics. So, I've already introduced the idea that I'm going to talk about cloud. I guess for people that, maybe believe or disbelieve that our future lies in the cloud, I just sort of dropped this sort of little graph in. This relates to membership in what Jane talked about, the open subsurface data universe. If people haven't come across that yet, I would highly recommend just tapping that into any of the internet search engines. If you just search on Open Subsurface Data Universe, I did check yesterday, it's #1 on the search results. It's easy to find, and there's a good range of information online there. But the graph really just shows over time the number of organisations that are actually actively participating in that, and you actually pay to join, so it's a good measure. So it really began early in 2018 as a discussion between 6 operators. And then in January, sort of December 2018, January 2019, they opened that up with a call for broader membership. And you can see there, as we stand today, March 2020, it's gone from 6 to now as 150 different, more than 150 different organisations. It's about 25, 26 operators. All the normal service companies that you would expect, all the major cloud vendors, a number of different IT suppliers, system integrators, and even regulators and different industry bodies like PPDM and Energistics. So it has gained a lot of traction, and I think it's good evidence that, indeed, as a sector, our future of subsurface data, to some extent at least, is going to be on the cloud. So what I really want to do today is look at some of the decisions that need to be made as a result of us moving to the cloud. So the data seems like a really good place to start. And, really I want to talk about how, as organizations, we shift data to the cloud. And that's obviously a necessary activity. It isn't on the cloud at the moment. As the boxes show, the distribution across the different 4 and maybe even more than 4 categories can vary from organization to organization, but it's going to be in file systems, in offline media, attached to applications, and particularly for metadata in systems of record. That whole body of data is going to need shifted to some sort of cloud environment, be that AWS or Azure or Google or anything else. And really, there are 2 different sort of philosophies and options that you can pursue. So option A is very much the sort of the philosophy of the data should be validated, QC'd, QA'd, and standardized before it's moved to the cloud. Whereas option B is a concept that that validation and the QC and the QA and the standardization can happen after it's been moved to the cloud. Option A would be generally considered quite a human-led activity, perhaps using some supervised machine learning technology, whereas option B would be a much more technology-led, do it whilst in the cloud using technology, perhaps with unsupervised machine learning. So, in terms of a decision, go for option A or option B. What are some of the kind of key points and key points in terms of making decisions? Well, option A, the do it before you move it, that obviously risks taking longer than what are called here corporate patience. So anybody who has tried to kind of pitch an idea to an operator executive in terms of a project time and cost will know that once projects become more than 2 or 3 years, they do need to be truly incredibly strategic before they gain buy-in. And obviously a wholesale shift of petabytes of various different types of subsurface data is a long project. Because it takes a long time and it's human-led, it's potentially going to be very high cost. But on the positive side, it captures the knowledge and the wisdom of the staff that are doing it, and that could be a very, very considerable element. And really, it's a case of do it once and do it right, and that's why it takes time and money. Option B, of course, if you move it to the cloud and really rely upon technology to do the work, it has the potential to be highly cost and time efficient. There is a key risk that the technology and the companies that are encouraging us to use that technology could well be over promising the capabilities of their technology, because of course they want to make a sale. Of course, if it doesn't involve the people that know and understand and love that data, it fails to capture their knowledge and wisdom. And the mentality there is really, if you've moved it and not standardized it or QC'd or QA'd it all, it's put it right when it's found to be wrong. So it's just a case of we'll live with it as it is, and if we find out it's a problem, then we'll spend the money to put it right. So the key decision that comes from that really is, option A or option B. Is one better than the other, or does each data type need to be considered on a case-by-case basis? And I myself have not come to a conclusion on that. I do think it is on a case-by-case basis. And of course, we have to be mindful that option B could become more and more viable over time as technology improves and proves that it's capable of doing that. The second decision I want to talk about relates to application development and application deployment. And of course, just as a quick recap, software and applications are generally developed using one of these two methodologies, the classic waterfall methodology, or a more agile and most people would consider a more modern development life cycle. Important to sort of recognize it's the same steps and the same processes take place in the development. It's just that the kind of the order and the way that they're done varies in terms of how rapidly you go through those again and again and again. And that has some very kind of important connotations, particularly for deployment. So the last step of both of those was, of course, deployment, actually putting that application or that software into use in an environment. And if I can kind of compare the deployment of those two methodologies, waterfall and agile, the release schedule of a software application or a product delivered via the waterfall methodology might be once every 6 to 12 months. Whereas with an agile methodology, it's really once per sprint, and a sprint in our industry at least would typically be 2 to 4 weeks. System deployment, so actually deploying it into your environment on your servers or your own cloud architecture, with a waterfall methodology and a release once every 6 to 12 months. That's traditionally quite most commonly a manual process. Obviously, if you're releasing and deploying something every 2 to 4 weeks, you need to automate it. And the testing mechanism, if you're every 6 to 12 months, the normal way of testing would be in a pre-production or a test environment and a very manual process. Whereas again, if it's every 2 to 4 weeks, that simply isn't viable. So you're really looking at automated testing and certifications of what you're doing so that it will work in your environment. So the conclusion between the two from a deployment point of view is there are very significant differences. And the decision that needs to be made is, how as an organization do you want to transition from predominantly using traditional applications, which are developed using waterfall methodology and you have a release once every 6 to 12 months, to a more microservice architecture where there can be updates and improvements every 2 to 4 weeks using the agile methodology. So the next two slides really show some kind of different scenarios in terms of the decisions that you might make. So what the graph shows is along the x-axis we've got time, and the y-axis sort of the quantity. And here quantity, you could consider it money, or you could consider it time, or you could consider it effort. And what it shows, the blue line is our legacy applications. They will be moved to the cloud via a kind of a lift and shift methodology. And the green line is microservices, so it's those smaller applications being delivered via the agile methodology, where the development and deployment methodology is CI/CD, which is continuous integration or improvement and continuous deployment. So in other words, continuously developing a product and continuously being able to deploy that product into an actual production environment. So this kind of balanced approach shows that really, it's an organization that is putting most of its effort saying, I want to just take what I've already got, the application environment, which could be 20, 30 different geoscience applications and data management applications. I'm going to put all of my effort, or the majority of my effort, into making those legacy applications work on the cloud so that I can support my current workflows. Whilst in the background, starting to explore and put more work into kind of the microservice architecture. At some point in time, obviously aiming to kind of ramp that up. And obviously at the time that they become more capable, it's then ramped down the amount of work going on in the legacy applications. Whereas an alternate approach, and I'm aware that this is being pursued by some organizations, is really to put a lot of effort into both. It's to say, let's take the absolutely necessary legacy applications and move them into the cloud. But at the same time, it's put an awful lot of time and resource into microservices, really to pull forward the date at which we, they as an organization can be essentially saying, look, we are largely now microservices driven in terms of our geoscience workflows. So that's just sort of two viewpoints of how companies might make that decision. And of course, every organization and perhaps even every individual in the right role probably needs to have a viewpoint on that. And just as a sign of the final decision 3 is really, a people-focused one. Don't forget the people. Here, what I've kind of tried to do is show the different tasks that take place on that subsurface data collection. So along the base of the slide there, we have some of the traditional data management activities, data ingest, so taking receipt of it, validating it, QA and QCing, before obviously then moving it into the sort of the cloud environment. The cloud environment is no different to our current environment. The data needs to be managed. We need to enact and keep up to date governance. We need to continually seek to improve that data and all of those day-to-day tasks that are necessary to keep the data current and protected and obviously compliant with regulations. And of course, at a point in time, we need to either archive or dispose of data or indeed provide copies to regulators or partners, joint venture partners and things like that. And at the top of the slide, we still have a group of what I call data users whose job it is to analyze and interpret the data, perhaps now employ analytics on that data. And their key activity really is value generation. It's about creating value from the data. So I think it's valuable to start to consider how different job titles map to those different activities. I think this is how we could map some of the traditional and new job titles to those activities. And in this case, there's a clear dividing line between them, in that it's the data manager's role to basically do the basic data management tasks to make sure that it's there and it's current and it's correctly governed and improved and high quality. Whereas really, in the same way that it's always been, it's a geoscientist's job to work with that data, but increasingly then we're seeing job titles like data scientist and data engineer creep in terms of being considered as adding value to the data. But increasingly what's happening is that line between the two is being blurred, and so almost the term data scientist and data engineer and indeed data manager is being used to mean perhaps doing some of all of those activities. If that's the case, and this is something that's actually come up on the Society's Slack channel in terms of people asking questions or seeking answers to this, what are the decisions that are needed? So, if we blur the line and think that, a data engineer could actually be expected to do data management activities, or indeed a data manager could be expected to do some data science activities, there's a corporate decision there to say, is there a clear line between the different disciplines? And therefore do you recruit and train into two or more distinctly different roles? Or do you actually say, no, I want individuals and roles that actually blend all of those different skills, in which case you need to recruit people with those different skills or cross-skill the people that you've got. And then, of course, it's to what degree. Do you have everybody as generalists, or do you still have some specialists in one role or the other, but aim to have those specialists having a more of a comprehension of the other roles? From an individual point of view, there's decision to be made to say, what is it you want to be? Do you want to be a pure data manager, or indeed is what you're seeking to be a data engineer or a data scientist, or perhaps one of those generalists, a bit of everything? So I think it's sort of the summary for that one is really, I think there's some personal decisions that need to be made in terms of where do you see yourselves and where do your skills lie, and perhaps how much cross-skilling do you want to do, but also at the same time the corporations are asking themselves those same difficult questions. So I hope that's got everybody thinking a little bit, and I'm sure there's lots of different opinions and also ideas of different decisions. I'll take this opportunity to hand back to Jane, and hopefully we'll facilitate an interesting Q&A.
Yes, that was actually a really good first great talk actually by the Society of Petroleum Data Managers, and thank you so much, Kerry, for a really great one. I think everybody's been quite quiet on the chat, but hopefully anybody would like to actually ask Kerry any questions and see if he can answer them for you, or just leave a message on the chat for a moment. Over to you guys. Any thoughts? Maybe perhaps, does anybody have any thoughts on the differences between the data scientists and the data engineers and the data managers? Any thoughts on that? Oh.
I have a question for Kerry, if I may, in relation to the microservices versus the larger way of doing things. Whether, Kerry, you have any experience in terms of taking what used to be typically very large monolithic applications that do all sorts of different things in a single package, and how you unpick those into a set of microservices in a way that keeps your business going. Clearly, there are challenges there in terms of continuity as you take the aeroplane apart while it's in flight and put it back together again.
I mean, I think it's in, it's in its very early stages of infancy, and I think, for every organization, there's some big questions to be answered about, that automated testing and certification. And I think, my personal experience would be that, in new application development, which is seeking to, to perform the same functions as old applications, we are taking a microservices approach to that, which basically means that we are thinking how they all work together to basically give you an application, or to give our customers an application that works much like it did before, but obviously with an inbuilt future capability to kind of break that apart and to offer separate and individual microservices. And I think that's where we are at as an organization, and I think it's where maybe a lot of organizations are at. For me, there's a significant challenge in terms of company adoption of microservices, in that, of course, you will not develop them all of yourself. You will not develop every microservice that you want to use yourself. And indeed, you are unlikely to purchase or license or subscribe to them all from just one supplier, which means that when you are trying to test a microservice to mean is it going to work, you need awareness or a standard that you can test against, that that everybody else's microservices that's developed against that standard will then work with it. That's one of the key kind of work streams within Open Subsurface Data Universe, but it hasn't actually reached the point where it's produced a deliverable yet, and I think there's a lot of organizations eagerly awaiting that, so that they can understand and begin to start delivering those microservices in a way that they know that customers will feel confident they can adopt, because they'll all work together.
Okay, thank you I hope that answered your question, Dan. We've got a few now actually on the chat session, and the first one, Kerry, is there a place for using the waterfall methodology anymore, or will this eventually phase out?
I think there is still a case for using it, maybe not through choice, but because the way that a lot of things are tendered and procured actually demands those fixed timelines. You know, what are you going to deliver by when is a very common question to see in a procurement process. And that really drives you towards a more waterfall methodology. Even if in the background your preference is to use agile, you know, you still need to ask those fundamental, or be capable of answering those fundamental questions. Yeah, that's, you know, my preference would be to not do, but I think that because of you know, the way the industry works, we're forced to.
Okay, thanks for that one. I've got still a few more. I've got I think Neil mentioned you did a great job of looking into the how, but did not say much about the why, especially that a microservices world a la OSDU is some way off. Why bother with the cloud at all? I think that was from the same person as well.
I think if you look at the why, if you look at the collective opinion of the OSDU members and what's been published, the why is really to stimulate a greater range of companies and providers that can contribute, you know, applications and technologies into the sector. So that's a very operator-centric perspective. I think, you know, what they've elaborated is that, you know, they see there's huge barriers to entry in terms of knowledge and investment and time if you're going to build an application that can do everything. By going to microservices, it gives much smaller companies the opportunity to build and deliver something much smaller. So it is about competition and innovation. Okay,
thank you. I've got, I think I've got one here from Patrick saying, I tend to believe people can get hung up on the semantics of job titles. Whilst titles are important, I believe competencies and roles are the more important factors. I know. Oh, I think I'm echoing now, chaps. Suddenly that way, so I apologise for that. I know at one time CDA published a set of competencies, and I know PPDM are working on competencies as well. Does anyone know if the SPDM is going to tackle or embrace these competencies? We could probably answer that a little bit. Dan?
I think that is a great question. It's an area that we have a lot of interest, both within SPDM and also in my day job as part of OG UK. We would very much like to understand how the role of competencies in a competency management frameworks can move forwards into this world where the roles and the activities of data managers are changing. It feels like on a, not quite on a day-to-day basis, but certainly on a month-to-month basis. And there's a question in that as to whether the competency framework, which originally specified something like a well data manager or a seismic data manager, is something that is still fit for purpose in a world where job roles are much more fluid and much more open in terms of the range of skills and activities that you get involved in. So we're very keen to look at this. If you have an interest and passion in helping us think through and being part of a group that thinks through the question of how do we build a competency framework for essentially an industrial data manager that's working in well data or seismic data or in oil and gas data, we'd love to have your thoughts and your energy as part of that.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that answered your question, Patrick. We do have one more, I believe, so far from Kelly. She said, what do you see the operator's value proposition for the formation of OSDU?
Kelly's a he.
Sorry, I apologise. That was. But I apologise, Kelly.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are asking themselves this question, and I think publicly, what's stated is that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of basic cloud architecture and standards, which it doesn't enable the oil companies to differentiate themselves from one another. So it is very much a case of we can get there much faster and much more efficiently if we collaborate. And of course they kind of all want to get to the cloud. you know, at much the same time, and you know, take advantage of microservices and new technologies. So I think, you know, the kind of the key value proposition for them is you know, get there and don't compete on the bits we don't need to compete on faster than we otherwise would.
Okay, thank you very much, Kerry. I don't believe we've got any more questions unless anybody's got anything else they'd like to ask. Just
Jane, this is Martin Wadsworth.
Hi, Martin.
Hi. The question you were initially prompting for, I'm going to ask Kerry, I think. In your presentation, Kerry, you were suggesting that when you're managing this data up in the cloud, you need data managers and data scientists and engineers. And I think you were prompting for, is there such a composite beast, or are you talking three different people? But I'd be interested to know. I mean, we've got a number of people here that I think the vast majority are data managers. We probably all see the need to learn some data science. Are you seeing? Are you seeing that animal appearing? Are you seeing people? Are you hiring people now who have those dual skills?
In a word, yes. If I kind of roll it back 15, 20 years and say, you know, I think it's always been valuable to have some members of the data management community who understand, you know, the value creation use cases, which in the past would have been a geoscientist. So I think it's always been useful to have data managers who can view this from a, you know, a geologist, geophysicist, petrophysicist eyes. And in the same way, I think a data manager today, it's very useful if they can view the data usage through the eyes of a data scientist, because only then do you really understand what the user is looking for and needs from the data.
Thank you. And where are you picking those individuals up from? Are they coming from? Do they have geology degrees, or are they coming out of data science degrees? Or I'm just kind of interested as to where the next generation is coming from.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of seeing them come out of, you know, geoscience degrees and masters. I think fine to share. There was it was one of the presentations at the SM conference last year in Norway. Was actually a joint effort between a senior person within BP and a recent graduate who'd been recruited into one of those kind of, you know, geoscience data science roles. And their background was Masters of Petroleum from, I think it was Imperial, but had obviously, you know, chosen to go down quite a data science pathway. And yeah, those, I think people, well, I know for a fact because my daughter's currently doing one, you know, people who are undertaking an earth science degree at university at the moment are certainly, well, encouraged and in some cases required to use, you know, typical data science tools and methodologies to answer the questions that, you know, perhaps some of us on this call would have been expected to answer in far more traditional ways.
That's good to hear. Yeah, good. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's the change. That's the change in the way that we are actually training the next generation, whether it's in the earth sciences or in a petroleum data management course. People are learning to do more data analytics and using the tools available, which we didn't have. So it's a totally different skill set, but we can actually adapt some of the skills that we have into that and learn skills. And I know that quite a few of the data managers I know are actually turning towards more of the data analytics and the data science by actually just improving their skill set with that, you know, on the tools that are available. So whether it's to just do analytics or using the Power BI or learning Python scripting, it's all there. And I think we just have to start adopting those new skills. So anyway, I'm sure we've all gone on and it's 15:34. So I think probably we'll leave it at that and just say thanks again, Kerry, for a great talk. And I hope everybody who's been online enjoyed the talk, and hope we might see you again the next webinar, which we are scheduling for the 28th of April 2020, again obviously. This is going to be hopefully a talk on data management as a remote service in the COVID-19 world. We may expand on that later, and hope you enjoy that next talk. And any feedback, more than welcome. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.